survival of the pig. With your host, Arthur If Swain.
Okay, we in? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome one more time. Welcome back to Prison Kingpin 187 of Life. Tonight we have a very, very special guest on, Mr. Mike Alden, Esquire, CEO of Alden Media. Man, this is a dynamic brother. I had an opportunity to meet him some weeks ago in Florida. And it is truly a pleasure and an honor to have this brother on the stage tonight, on the platform tonight, to give us his experiences that he went through as a kid growing up. Without further ado, Mr. Mike Alden.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Boy, I tell you, that opening was pretty awesome.
Thank you.
I liked it. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Appreciate I appreciate you having me here. I'm excited to get into it, as we said earlier.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to introduce myself. My name is L.C. Harmon. We also have on the stage in the platform tonight, Mr. Pablo Ogrillo and Mr. Mike Swain. We're not going to take up a whole lot of time. I really just want to give you the floor because I know that you have a whole lot to say and a whole lot to give. And I don't want to cheat the audience. I want them to get a real good understanding of all the things you went through and what led you to be upon our platform tonight as our esteemed guest. I know that there's some things that we're going to discuss about childhood poverty and the trauma that you all went through as you was growing up. So let's get on into that,
Sure.
Into the childhood poverty that you went through. Give us a real good in-depth, don't scam, don't cheat. I mean, give it to us. Let it be raw, man, because this is what we want.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I grew up in the projects, Section 8, we were on WIC and, our Christmases were subsidized by the Salvation Army, and my mom's HIV positive. My stepfather died of AIDS. My father was addicted to coke. Kid I grew up with in jail for life for murder. I wasn't really the best kid. I remember what it was like in elementary school, middle school, and high school because my lunch was subsidized by the state. I had to stand in a separate line. And I still to this day remember what that feels like because I was just treated like a different person because I had to stand in a separate line. I had this little card that I had to show, which basically told the whole world, here's the poor kid, And I remember, when my mom would be in tears because the electricity bill was shut off, or when one time she said, hey, Mike, go outside. I'm from New England. She said, hey, Mike, go outside and warm up the car. I went outside and the car wasn't there. And it wasn't that it was stolen. It was that, it was repossessed. I'm a pretty big dude. I was also, I fought a lot. I got in a lot of fights. I've been stabbed, shot at. I've hurt people pretty bad, throughout my life when I was a kid. And it was just because that was the environment that I was in. That's the way I grew up, and I, fighting, back then was, that was really a lot of times my only option to really kind of prove myself, I guess, it was difficult, right? The way I grew up, but I always tell people all the time, man, like I look back on it and I knew I was poor, right? I think, if you grow up poor, you kind of know you're poor, But I'll tell you this, like there was always kids to play with, right? We were always doing stuff. A lot of times we were probably doing things we shouldn't be doing. But you know, we were always doing stuff. But when I think about what makes me so different, right? Because again, I have, one of my brothers died of an overdose. Another brother, did time at 17 for distribution at 17 years old. Another brother, was arrested multiple times and did, he was addicted to heroin and it's like why am I different? You know what I mean? Like, why am I different than anybody else? Like, really, what's this, why? I mean, we all grew up kind of the same way in the same circumstances and kind of the same parents. And I think about, for me, the big difference for me, I think was there's a couple. One of the biggest ones is I didn't do drugs. That was the first thing. Like I didn't smoke weed. I didn't do acid when everyone else was all doing that shit. I drank, I was drinking here and there, but I just didn't like cross that line. And I saw so many people that crossed that line that their lives would just materially change. And especially as a young, adolescent, where your brain is still being developed, even with, weed and, which is now pretty much legal everywhere. It's still a challenge for people, especially at a very young age. So I think I was pretty fortunate that I didn't do any of that stuff. And then also I had coaches and teachers and my parents that actually cared. My mom wasn't a crackhead. My father, even though he was addicted to coke, he went to rehab and then he came out and then he never looked back. My stepmother, unfortunately, she didn't make it through, and the pills ultimately got her. So. I mean, that's kind of just those are the basics, right? Of what kind of how I grew up. But again, my first book, I started out with, thank God I was born poor.
Yeah.
Because I think if you grow up the way I think all of us grew up, you have two choices. And I think all of us did both. Which is, you hustle and try and figure out a way to make money so you can buy the things that you want. I wanted G.I. Joes. I wanted Z Cavariccis. You guys remember Z Cavariccis? Or you guys love it, you wanted like the expensive, you wanted the IOU bum shirt. Like you wanted that stuff, but they were really expensive. So you either had to figure out a way to get a job at a very young age or get some sort of hustle going on with or you stole shit. Right. And I did both. Right. And I think when I was telling you when we were in Clubhouse last time is like, people don't realize that growing up the way we grew up, why we do these things, because you have no choice. And, we were talking earlier, like, I think a lot of people have grown up in way worse situations than mine. Yeah, I was shot at once. It was point blank, and I'm pretty lucky. But that was it. There are neighborhoods and there are kids that I know that, stray bullets are like a common thing. Still to this day, right? And so for me, I didn't experience really any of that stuff. I didn't have, gangs. I have friends out, from the West Coast, that was their only family, and so, like I said, it was difficult, but I obviously made it through. And I think the big difference for me was the drug part of it, and then athletics. If it wasn't for baseball and football and coaches, I would be dead or in jail.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's very true for, a lot of people that grew up, in that type of environment. But let me ask you this here. As a child, when you realized that you had to make choices, even at a very young age, when you came to that point, did you have a plan, when you got ready to try to make life better for you, or you just did what you needed to do and then figure it out as you go?
Well, I think it's a great question, man, because I do think that there is a pivotal moment in a lot of kids' lives that they have to make the decision. It's not their parents. It's not anyone else. They have to make the decision. And there were kind of two moments in my life, and I'll tell you guys, and they're really interesting. At least I think they are. One is I was getting, we were stealing things. I was fighting. I think I said earlier, like when we first met, that one of the big differences with me is I just never got caught, with a lot of the stuff. But my parents knew what I was up to when they saw like I had $150 pants, and like our rent was $150 a month, because of Section 8, right? It's like how are you getting these, right? They kind of knew. And so one day my father took me I get chills every time I tell a story. My father took me for a long walk on the beach. And he said, listen, you're going down the wrong path. You're doing these things. You're committing petty crimes. You're getting into, you're fighting. You are in and around the drug scene. I didn't do drugs, but I was with people that were selling it and stuff, And he said, look, here's the deal. If you're going to do this, let's do it the right way.
Okay.
I said, what are you talking about? He goes, if you want to be a gangster, I'm Italian. If you want to be a gangster, I can introduce you to real gangsters. I can introduce you to really bad people. And, they're really good at what they do. But here's the things you need to understand. One, you'll probably end up in jail. Two, you'll probably you'll die at a young age. But at least you'll be really good at it. Right? And I was like, I was like 14 when he said that to me, and I was really upset. And I'm like, this is crazy, that he would say this to me. So that really stuck with me. And then this one I think was a real big one for me. So I'm from Beverly, Massachusetts, which is the birthplace of the American Navy. If you've ever heard of Salem, Massachusetts, the witch trials is next town over. And also, if you think about Beverly, Massachusetts, you're like, there's no projects in Beverly. There's projects in pretty much every town, right? But I was playing basketball in a few towns over in a town called Peabody, Massachusetts. This is way pre-internet, pre-cell phone, pre-any of that stuff. And these kids knew who I was. And which is, a few towns over, it's like going to another country practically, right? How do they know who I was? Well, they knew, and I was 15. They knew who I was because they had heard of a pretty violent episode with me, and I had hurt somebody pretty bad.
Okay.
And I came home and I told my mom the story. I said, hey, yeah, we're in Peabody, we're playing basketball, and I was with my friends when I was there in the house, and I was telling her, and I was like, yeah, these dudes knew who I was, whatever. And she said, how do they know who you were? And I said, well, because I beat up so and so. And then my mom looked at me and she said, is that how you want to be remembered? And I get chills now, and I'm like, fuck, no, because I always in my community, the weirdest part about where I grew up, there's extreme wealth, like old money from the days, from the Puritan days, and then there's also, pretty horrific, poverty. And I was in that poverty area. So I had this really kind of weird mix, of people. And when when she said that to me, I started to see the world a little bit differently. Right. And I was like, man, I don't want to be that kid anymore that everybody says I'll be dead by the time I'm 17. My girlfriend's mother told me that you'll be dead by the time you're 17, if you keep doing what you're doing. And I just was like, I made that decision myself that I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to be a punk anymore. Did I change immediately overnight? No. But here's what I did look at. I saw some of these other kids in their quote rich neighborhoods, which now if you look back on them, they were just middle class, right? They were paying attention in school, and they were doing their homework, and they were showing up for tests, and they weren't talking back to the teachers, and they were just being good human beings, and when I saw that how kind of simple it was, I started to turn my life around. But I'll tell you this, and I tell my daughter this all the time. My daughter's 16. I had screwed up so bad, like my first couple of years in high school, that my grades were horrific, and it was so bad it didn't even matter it mattered, but from my freshman year and into my halfway through my sophomore year, I almost was failing like everything, but just barely, like D's and C minuses and stuff, but then when I realized it was time to turn it around, I started doing well in school, but I was in such a deep hole that it became difficult to climb out of. I did. Right. But it was really, really, really difficult. And I'll tell you this, a crazy story too about that part of my life is that, I mentioned this kid I grew up with was in jail for life for murder, and he killed his girlfriend when he was 16 and she was 14. And I mean, these were people these are people in my neighborhood, and it was pretty horrific and tragic, the way the whole thing went down. And, so my senior year in high school, I had to testify in this murder trial. By the way, this murder trial was worldwide, and because of just the facts. And I had to testify in that trial and I was called by the defense, which is, I didn't ask to be called by the defense. But by then I was a senior in high school. I was class president. I was captain of the football team, and I was pretty much a straight A student, right? but I was testifying to the things that I saw and did several years prior. I was a completely different person. But then it became a very, very traumatic experience for me because now everybody learned who I was back then. And then everybody thought I was still that person when in fact I wasn't. So again, I guess the kind of the point of that story is that, and I tell my daughter this all the time is don't put yourself in bad situations that it's very, very difficult to overcome. And to this day, what the thing I'm talking about is still something that it gets brought up in my life, and luckily I wasn't there because I could have easily been there when the whole thing happened.
Okay. Mike, I do have a few more questions, but I want to see if anyone of my anyone else on the panel would like to ask you anything. So I'm gonna go with our brother Mike Swain to see if Mike, you have anything that you want to ask him.
Of course. I did a little research on you, and I like what the direction of this. I'm loving the build up because we and I resonated with so much that you said because I had that car, in lunch, and my mother always made sure we was dressed nice, but I didn't know a lot of them clothes came from boosting, and I didn't know them things growing up. You know what I'm saying? So I would be, in the third grade with a polo shirt on, and a polo hat, but I'm going through the welfare lunch line in school, So a lot of the stuff you're saying is it's mirrored. It's a mirror to me. It's a mirror to me because I man, it's you never know, bro, what somebody's been to get to where they at, right? I'm interested in the accomplishments, right? I'm interested in who is Mike now.
Yes.
Because that's we got an hour with you and we're gonna hear that. So I know, that's the part that excites me. The struggle, the testimony. Yeah, we love it. We want to know it, but that's the part that excites me. So, with my first question is, how old were you when you said I'm gonna change?
Yeah, I was 15. It was pretty much probably right after that moment when my mom said, "Is that how you want to be remembered?" And I think too, I stress this a lot for kids and because at the end of the day, like we as our individual selves have to make the decision, right? And so when my brother who passed away, Dominic, of an overdose, my family members were always like, you got to talk to him. You got to get through to him. And I did. But for him, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when, because he had made that decision, and some people do turn it around, but a lot of times in that scenario, when, heroin gets a hold of you, you guys probably all know people where it's just kind of too late. And so at 15 is really when I made the decision. But I tell you too, right? Like I wasn't, it wasn't on the straight and narrow automatically, right? Because I'm still poor. I'm still a tough kid. I'm still fighting. I was trying to avoid it. I'll tell you this about me, for 90% of the stuff that the violent activity I was ever involved in, I always avoided it. Always. But it's like, if you're confronted, I didn't wait to understand why I was confronted, right? You want to hit first, so and figure it out later, and so so I was still struggling after that point. And I'll tell you this, when I was 14, here's another big one I'll tell you guys, and I don't talk a lot about this, but it's a really interesting story, and it does kind of almost bring us, Mike, to like where I'm at today. So I was 14. I got arrested on a Harley Davidson. It was an AMC Harley Davidson. I was driving around the city. I just dropped my girlfriend off, and all my friends had dirt bikes, and they were always out running the cops and shit. And my mom got this thing literally at a yard sale for like $50, right? But the thing was badass, right? It was fast or whatever, and I was so proud to have it. So I drop her off by my high school, and I'm coming down the hill, and I look behind me. You know, back in the day when you could tell it was a cop car because of the lights, right? The headlights, you know. So I look back, and I was like, oh shit, there's a cop. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna outrun this guy, right? So I shift gear, and now I'm doing probably 70. He turns the blues on, then he turns the siren on. Now he's chasing me. I blow through 2 stop signs. I cut across the street. Cars veer off the side of the road. I go now. I'm over by the middle school. Now where I grew up was like right behind the middle school. So I'm like, cool, I'm home free. Like there's no way this guy's catching me. And as I'm driving, they had just removed these posts and beams that allowed cars to drive onto the soccer field. They just did it like, but it's interesting because if they hadn't, I don't know, my life would be maybe different. And I turned the corner, I dumped the bike. And cops, you know, you could tell, you know, obviously they were pissed. They were really upset. And by then, there were 3 cop cars, right? So I get cuffed, and I don't think anything of it. And, you know, they bring me to the station, and my mom was actually playing bingo, right? And she's like, just leave him there, because she was probably fed up with me. Just leave him there. And I got arrested. And it made the front page of the paper. And it said, cyclist 14 faces many charges after schoolyard chase. Right.
Wow.
So the next day, I was at football practice. I was a freshman, and it's crazy how the chain of events. And the coach goes, "Hey, did you hear about that crazy lunatic driving around Beverly? He was like right by here last night or whatever. It was nuts, you know, could have killed somebody." And I was like, "Yeah, that was me." And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was me." Immediately pulls me aside. We're going to talk after practice. He brings me to I was just a freshman. He brings me to the head coach, who I didn't know. I was just a freshman, you know. And we sit down, and they tore into me and said, anything like that ever happens again, you're off the team. So that was the first thing that happened. But I got arrested, and I was facing all these charges, right? And my mom didn't have money for a lawyer, and the cops were pissed, rightfully so. You know what I mean? And again, if you think about it, in the world of crimes, it really wasn't that big of a deal, but it kind of was. Like, people could have gotten hurt, right? So I got probation for I got a year probation, and my probation officer, his name is Jeffrey Ryan, right? He played in the CFL. It's a big black dude, right? The reason why I say that too is that where I grew up, there wasn't diversity like there is today, you know. And he drove a Ferrari. And he was a probation officer, you know, and he was fucking just, you know, he played in the CFL, you know, for years. And so when I had him as a probation officer, I was the next town over. I was in Salem, Mass, and where the courthouse was. I had to report to him once a week, right? Here's the interesting thing about this guy. He showed up to every single one of my football games because he played football. He took an interest in me and a liking to me, but he scared the shit out of me. Right. And when my grades weren't, you know, when I was getting below the C's, I had to sit down with him, and he would tear into me and just, really trying to get me on that right path, you know. And there were times where if I didn't show up, you know, he'd violate, because I had a year suspended sentence. Right. So, you know, he could have violated me, and then I could have, you know, gone to juvie or whatever. But, you know, so that was always hanging over my head. And so every week I met with him, and there were times where I couldn't get a ride there, you know, because there was only one car. So I had to walk there, you know, and so Jeff Ryan paid, you know, a close attention to me and really cared about, you know, my life and where it was going. And I'm sure he did that with everybody. Here's a crazy story. So remember I told you about the murder that I was involved in? Well, the district attorney, tore me apart in the papers as well. Front page of the papers had me in my football uniform with him. His name's Kevin Burke, and it was Kevin Burke and me, like they were facing each other. I mean, it was crazy. And he said things like, "So much for the class president at Beverly High School," and I can't believe that his colleagues would vote for him. He's a bad kid. But I had testified to things I did years prior. Right? I was a different person by then. Right? So it was a horrible, horrible time for me. You know, we were 6-0 in football, and we played this town called Lynn English, and they were just bad. We lost that game. I didn't do well on the SAT. It was just a horrible weekend for me. And I remember it was very, very traumatic and painful. And this guy didn't know me. He didn't know who I really was, and neither did anybody else. And there wasn't the internet, so there was just the paper. So everybody in the paper now thinks that I'm this kid, that I'm like this fucking just really bad person, and I really wasn't, and it really hurt me, So I end up graduating high school. I played football, so I was fortunate enough. I got into Springfield College. I graduated Springfield. We'll talk about the history of that, but I want to just kind of get into the story. So I graduate. I was a political science major. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, and I could tell you probably why, I wanted to be a lawyer too, but I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. So I graduated with a political science major. By the way, I was class president there, played football, as well. And there was an event. That original coach that I told you about that said, Mike, that was you. That same coach was running for office in my town.
Okay.
And I wanted to help him out, right? So not only did I help him out, but I essentially ran his campaign for him. And now this district attorney, Kevin Burke, very powerful guy. You know how powerful the DAs are, right? He was at this event that I was essentially involved in. And I walked up to him and I handed him my resume and I said, so much for the class president of Beverly High School. And he's like, Mike, I remember you. He's like, I want to talk to you. I hear you're doing great things. And I was so fucking angry at this guy because of what he had done to me and really the light that he portrayed me in just wasn't accurate. And he never apologized.
Yeah.
So he said, I want to meet with you. Right. So I meet with him. He says, what do you want to do with your life? I said, it's funny you asked that. I said, I want to be a lawyer. And he says, where do you want to go to law school? I said, well, I want to go to Suffolk, which is in Boston. It's a, kind of a blue collar, school and great school, but it's mostly like local. And he went to UConn and he said, I'll do whatever it takes to help you get in. Right. So I did end up getting into law school, and we can talk about that at point, but here's the other part about how this whole thing kind of comes full circle. So I get to the end of my career in law school, and I realize I have no legal experience, like none, because I went to law school nights, right? Because I'm still poor, by the way, at this time. I'm still poor, still struggling, and I had to work. And so you don't have the same opportunities as the day students as far as like internships and shit, right? So I realized that I'm like, oh my God, like I'm going to graduate law school and I have no legal experience. So I reached out to Kevin Burke and his assistant. Her name is Ann Reardon. And I said, hey, listen, is there any way you can get me into what they call the prosecutor's program, right? Which is something that you have to apply for, and there's a rigid, process. And she said, sure, no problem. A week later, I was in. And by the way, it was an amazing experience. And being thrown in the fire is an understatement. You get certified by the Supreme Judicial Court. You walk into court, and you are effectively a prosecutor. Nobody knows that you're a student. But it wouldn't have happened if all those negative things hadn't happened to me as well. And it's kind of crazy when you kind of draw those dots and you really think about, all those chains of events, the negative things then ultimately turned into that positive thing. And some of the funny stuff too about that, I had trouble sometimes at being a DA because a lot of the people that were there, like I was just like them, So, I remember I'd locked this guy up and he had stole, what did he steal? He was just a habitual offender. He had a huge rap sheet. And so I just went bananas, tried to lock him up or whatever. The judge dismissed it and said, whatever, kid. And 2 days later, the guy got arrested for armed robbery in Home Depot. He came back in and I had him again. And the judge looks at me now at this point and says, all right, counselor, Commonwealth. He said, what do you want to do? So I enjoyed it, but at the same time, I empathized with people. So, Mike, I don't know that really answered your question, but it kind of gets us there a little bit.
The reason why I asked that question, Mike, is because of this. I think we was around the same age. I was, my same story, trouble, youth, boom, boom, boom. I think we was around the same. I might have been 14, 15 when I decided for the first time in my life that I was going to change, right? So I told my mom was like, what do you want to do? So I told my mom, I'm saying, I want to go back to school, right? So I ran a 4.2, 4.3 40. I could dunk a basketball goal when I was 12 years old. I was like 5'8", 5'9", Never lost a race. Um, when I played football, wide receiver, middle linebacker, um, I was just, I was a man. I was a gifted child, right? And so we went in front of the school board. We had to go in front of the school board for the school board to put me back in school, because now I was going to the high school where I had quit school in the 7th grade. So we sat in front of the school board and they asked, each other questions. They didn't ask me nothing. They didn't ask me what would it mean to me to be put back in public school. And they basically denied my re-entry back into the school system because I had gotten in so much trouble the years prior. And that was the day, I'll never forget it. That was the day we left that meeting, and what I had in my heart and in my head was like, F the world, like it's me against the world. And from there, I got to hear, but it's just hearing it. And you never know. Like, I'm looking at you in this light, like, damn, who was this guy? The way you came on when we was on the show, and the way you came on, and your voice, your presence, your voice, it was in the room. You wasn't on the phone. You wasn't on Clubhouse. You was in the room with us. That's what I felt, right? So then to know, wow, the story, and you went this way and I went this way, but you could have easily went that way and I could have easily went your way.
By the grace of God go I, they say, right?
Yeah. So it's to me, I'm listening, but to me, I'm thinking of how our lives just do this as people. We just do this, we cross each other's paths, and we not knowing who these people are. But when you listen to them and get to know them, a badge is just something that's in front of that person. It's not that person. A pen or a suit is just something that's in front of that person. It's not that person. So just knowing that, what I mean, it's like it tells me what I could have. I get mad at myself because I know what I could have been, but if I would have been in any of those things, if I would have got millions of dollars back then, would I still have it now? If I get millions of dollars now, I know I'll have it for my kids. I'll die with it. Maybe I would have been a Lynn Bayer story. Who knows, right? But by the grace of God, we still here, and hearing your story, bro. It's like I'm just hearing me. I'm hearing me. I'm hearing me. I'm hearing me. Even when you said about the guy robbed the Home Depot, that I didn't rob a Home Depot, but I was on the other side of the DA. Mm-hmm. So, it's let Pablo say something to you, bro. It's
yeah. But let me say, before we get to our esteemed brother Pablo, I just want to ask one thing, because while we still in the moment, because I know for me, and listening to you, I can tell that you came from the same kind of hood and environment that I'm quite sure that everyone on this panel came from, and those that may be listening that hasn't made any comments came from the same hood. So I want to ask you this question. I want you to think about it too. At the moment that you decided to change your life, right? At your freshman year, and you wanted to change your life, and once you started changing your life, you had to testify, right? So I want to ask you this: how did it feel to tell on yourself once you made the change? I mean, because a lot of us don't want to. A lot of us don't want to tell something that's going to hurt, cripple, deny, or any one of those things. But when you decided that, hey, you know what, this is not me anymore. This is who I am. But not only that, you had to prove it by getting on the stand and then tell on yourself.
Yeah, not only getting on the stand, but it was all filmed too, and I mean in broadcast, and and so it hurt, man, and I did try to basically, kind of Another crazy part about that whole story was that I was there for 2 days, right, man, and I was so nervous, and they kept me down in like this basement. It was an old courthouse, and I was like puking and diarrhea. It was horrible, and so I didn't have a suit coat, right? I'm sure you guys probably didn't either. I didn't have I didn't have a tie, and so I had a denim shirt. And I didn't even have like undershirts. Because I didn't wear that stuff. First of all, most kids don't anyway, but I just didn't, right? So I had a denim shirt, and underneath it, I had a T-shirt. I was a big fan of U2, and I had a T-shirt on that said Zoo Tour on it. And so when I was in the basement, going to the bathroom, basically, apparently they called me and they couldn't find me. And the bailiffs came rushing down, like as if I was the guy that was on trial. And drags me into the courtroom, and I didn't have that denim shirt on anymore, and so I had this T-shirt that said Zoo Tour on it. Yeah, and I testified to things that were, that just weren't good. And look, the harsh realities of growing up the way we all grew up is it is what it is, and people might not want to hear about it. But that this is what happens, when we're kids running around and our parents might not be there, or we're poor and our parents are working and they just can't be, or whatever the situation is. Like, we just get involved in things that a lot of people can't even comprehend.
Right.
And the things I testified to, at 14 years old, when you think about, wait a minute. So at 14, you're fighting, you were drinking, you're having sex, you're drinking before school. You've stolen things, and now I'm the fucking class president, right? Like, it was like, what, you know what I mean? So yeah, man, it hurt. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it, because it still hurts. But I tell you this though, Mike, too, as well, is that, I was just talking to my therapist about this today, actually, because I have therapists like to go. I'm always going to be that kid from the hood. Always.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I think a lot of people, the mistake that people make is too many people stay there. And so it's not cool to be hanging out with your fucking boys anymore, right? It's just not, the guys that are still there doing whatever it is they're doing. Because, they might not be there anymore. They might be somewhere else. And so as you get old, it's just not cool. And I was telling my daughter that about, just about life in general. If you want to progress, whoever they are, say, surround yourself with people that you want to be, that you want to level up to. And so, but I tell you this, man, I still have a real chip on my shoulder, right? Because people are still looking to bring me down, and by the way, it's not just people in my world, it's just human nature. Like, we'd love to see the train wreck. And so I'm still the kid from the hood. And it's funny, my ex-wife said to me once when I became a lawyer, I swear all the time, as you can tell, I'm trying to, I'm from Boston. We just swear a lot, And she says, listen, you're a lawyer now. You need to start acting like it. And look, I'm wearing a sweatshirt from a company. I don't know if you can see it. It says Wicked Happy. I'm wearing it because it's a company. I'm not promoting it, but I'm saying I'm wearing this because it's something that I'm excited about and I'm a part of. Does it make me not a lawyer because I'm not dressed like one? You know what I mean? So I'm still me, and I'm always going to be me. But what I've learned in order to progress, Mike, right? In order to get to the places that I needed to get to, I did need to change my behavior. I did need to change the way I spoke. I did need to listen to more people. But I think what also, Mike, has made me successful, and however you want to define that term, is that I can mix it up with anybody.
Right.
I can mix it up with literally a guy that's on this, like, living on the street, and billionaires. And it's just because I have seen a lot, and I can empathize with pretty much anybody. And also the other thing too, man, and it seems like you guys have this too. I'm just interested in other people.
Right.
I'm just really, like, you guys, like, when I came into that room, it's because of DeVell. And when DeVell came into Clubhouse, I heard his story. It's like almost 2 years ago, and it blew me away. And I was like, man, you know what? Like, if I can help in any way, then I will. And I did. And it, for no other reason other than the fact that, Mike, like, it makes me really sad when I hear your story. because like my brother, who I was just with, he was heading down, he was going to be a great athlete. I was a senior in high school. I was a senior in college. He was a freshman in high school. And when I was training with him and we had the same last name, and I had, had a pretty good reputation as far as a football player. And like, man, like he's way bigger than me. And like, this kid had a shot to probably play D1, and he came out of the locker room, guys, to get on the bus for his first game. He slipped and fell on the cement and broke his leg. And he never played again.
Ooh, that's right.
And he dropped out of high school. And his life, I mean, he's a great person, and he's, but he, the same thing, I think about what could have been for him.
Right.
And it, it makes me sad,
Mm-hmm. Okay, I know her time is winding down, so I want to pass it to our brother Pablo, so we don't have no issues later on when we get off of this platform. So I'm gonna pass it on to our brother Pablo. Come on with it, Pablo. What you have to say to brother Mike.
Well, Mike, listen, you have an amazing story, man, and I think we could sit here for 4 or 5 hours and still be enthralled by everything that you have experienced and how you came through it, and where you're at right now. And so, but let me just shift the conversation to something that I think you would enjoy talking about a little bit. And I'm just going to use iMessages. I don't want to assume anything about my brothers, although they might benefit from your answer. I'm a struggling author. I have a message that I want to present to the world, and I'm having a tough time connecting with an audience. I don't know how to do that. I think my message is a powerful one, just like yours, but I don't know how to reach people. I don't know to get myself heard. And you know what they say, right? If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? So I know you have lots of things that you can draw from, experiences. I heard you for the first time at Clubhouse when I was in Orlando, and I'm hearing you now. And I know we're almost out of time. I don't even know if you have enough time.
Guys, listen. I don't have a hard break, so we won't go longer than an hour. Let's go. I'm
okay. Well,
yeah.
just talk a little bit about that, man. What are your recommendations? How do we increase our audience? How do we increase sales of the books that we have? How do we get our messages out there? I think I'm using the word we, even though I said I messages, but that's what interests me the most, man. I didn't embark on this journey just because I wanted to say I published a book and that's it. The book is there, and my family and 2 friends know that I published a book, and nobody else does, and nobody else knows the message. After the book was published, maybe I sold 10, 15 copies, and I don't know that I've sold more than 30 now. That's unacceptable to me. And I want to know if I can pick your brain, sir, and you can tell me what can I do to change that. Your story is amazing, but I'm living in the today, in the now, and I don't really have that much time left to be playing around, man. I need to get busy with this project, and I need to make it a success, or it won't amount to anything. The whole effort will come to nothing. What have you to say about that?
Yeah. So with my books, my first book is titled Ask More, Get More. And I launched that book, and we were crushing it as far as business. And I was like, I'm going to be a New York Times bestselling author. It's just a matter if I'm going to be number one or not. Right. That was like my mentality. And I've sold, at that time, we were doing like 20, 30, maybe even 40 million a year. I forget, it was 2014, probably. Yeah, right around that, right, per year in revenue. By the way, it sounds like a big number, but it's not profit, right? So, so I launched that book, and I was like, I've already sold a bunch of books before via direct response and television, and I've sold a bunch of other stuff, and I'm like, we're just gonna crush it. And we did okay, but I did not make the New York Times. I did make Wall Street Journal and USA Today, and I did that a couple times with that book. And I'll tell you this, man. And here's the harsh reality of books and authors is that the first thing is no one cares. And so including your friends and family, right? And that part is a really difficult thing to swallow, a pill to swallow. And so, like, trying to get your friends, relatives, and neighbors to buy the book, it's like you ask them to club a baby seal in front of school children, right? It's like the craziest thing. Why is there so much resistance from like my family members, right? I'm sure all of you have experienced it. It doesn't make sense, right? There's a couple of reasons why. I figured it out. One, it's just straight up jealousy, because everybody thinks they can write a book. Everybody thinks that, that they can be an author, when in all reality they can't. It's just most people don't have as interesting stories as you guys do, right? And so that's the reality of it. And then, the other thing is that they also, and the complete opposite side of it is, they feel as though because you're an author, you're already wildly successful and they don't need to give you help, or you don't need their help. So just because if you guys have been frustrated with what I've been frustrated with, those are the answers, right? To those. But because of the very essence of my book, Ask More, Get More, what I realized in life, even when I go back to when I was a kid, and now this applies to everything, and there's other books that have come out since mine, and I think this is called Ask, and there's all these other things, is that you do have to ask for help. You do have to ask others. You do have to pick people's brains, like you're doing with me right now. And so as far as like getting the message out there, here's the other harsh reality of it. It costs money. And when you see, books on the New York Times, right? Most of them are either like a political book, or they're like some sort of perennial author that's already been out there for a long time, or they're a celebrity. So if you look at the top 10 books in nonfiction, where the categories you guys would fall under, like 5 of them have already been on the New York Times for years, right? So now you only have 5 spots, right? And then if you're not with a major publisher, then you have no shot. It's just the way it is. So,
right.
And so all that stuff, it's like, all right, yeah. So what do I do, right? And what I've done and what I've realized is, in how I've been successful in marketing books and how we did it for like Devel is that I have sold millions of books, not me, but I mean total, like for other people too, right? And so I built a massive database where I was able to. I had a mentor of mine, actually a guy grew up in the projects in New York City. He came to me. By the way, I owed him $1 million. That's why I met him, and it's a long story. He's an Italian guy, and I owed somebody else the money. He goes, "Now you owe me the money." But anyway, so he came here to actually this very spot that I'm sitting in, which this is an actual sound studio for those who are watching, right? This was I didn't, it wasn't. We've been doing a podcast for years, but it was a voiceover room, and so he said to me, take a look at what you have, Mike. Take a look at your database and see if you can market your books towards those people, right? So that's what I started doing. So I built this pretty kind of cool, sophisticated system where we could sell a lot of books really fast, for people. So for me, that's kind of and I've spent millions of dollars, guys. And I always say, like, I wish I had it back. Because I'm not sitting on millions of dollars now. It depending on how long we go, like when you think about where my life is now, it's not like, and you guys can tell, like, I'm not one of these guys. I'm not wearing a Rolex, even though I have one, because I shouldn't be wearing it right now, because I'm not, showing the bling and all, because I'm just not in a good space right now. But so really to answer your question really is, when you're launching a book, whether it's before on pre-publication or after the publication, it's like a military operation where you have to really be strategic on kind of how you do it, and put all the pieces in place, and then really make sure that it's implemented. And so there's so many moving parts. Like right now, I'm marketing a book right now. It's called It's Impossible to Commit to Maybe. It's the #1 book on Barnes & Noble right now in the world, right? But we've been talking about it for months, kind of what we're doing. And so, to get your story out, like if you look at like what Deval's doing, like he's really out there, like holding the book up, he's going to events with it, he's hustling it like on the street. that's kind of like a difficult thing to do, but those are sometimes the things when people talk about going viral. Like if someone were to ever pick that up and ever see him at an event or whatever, you never know who you're going to really kind of be in front of, with that book. I know I didn't really give you like the best answer because I don't really necessarily. I mean, look, I can sit here and talk to you about all the strategies and on exactly kind of what to do, but I don't necessarily know it's gonna get you to really kind of like where you want to be because of because of the time. I think who you're with right now, I think your agent's awesome. I think she's such a great advocate, and I think what you guys are doing is great. So you guys are all self-published. Here's the thing, right? So I'll tell you this. Let's talk about the self-publishing world for a second. So, if you were to publish your book on Amazon KDP, you pretty much have no shot of doing anything at Barnes & Noble, which is kind of really, I mean, you got Books A Million and you got some independent stores that are still around, but you have no shot of really doing anything with Barnes & Noble, which is still the largest book retailer in the United States, right? Now, if your book, and you could change this, by the way, after the fact, if your book is, in fact, on Ingram Spark, you guys probably heard of that. Ingram Spark, you can have what they call wider distribution, and where your book can be disseminated across all platforms, including Barnes & Noble, Costco, Walmart, etc., online, right? But if you're in the system through Ingram Spark, and you walk into a Barnes & Noble in your town, they can at least see that you're in the system, and then you could potentially do something. So here's something that I would do, like if I were you. Every Barnes & Noble, Pablo, is there one near you?
Yes. There's one. Something happened with my camera, and I'm trying to figure it out, but I'm listening to you, so I don't want to lose you.
What city are you in?
Los Angeles. There's one nearby. In fact, Latif and I were just here Saturday.
Right.
Yes.
So those types of events are really cool. But if you do them on your own, so you guys did it the right way, and again, I think your agent's great, is if you do like a multi-author event like that, that's really a great opportunity. The other part about being in a B&N is Barnes & Noble is if you can also provide some sort of value. Everyone talks about value. Provide some sort of value, like give a speech about whatever it is you're going to give a speech about at Barnes & Noble and promote that to get people there. I like the idea of doing multi-authors because here's the thing, guys. I've done multiple book signings, and I have pictures of me, and there's nobody there. Nobody. Like it's so humbling, right? You go there, and it's like I got a stack of books. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, there's nobody shows up, right? Because I said earlier, like no one really cares. So if you create an event like that, I think it's kind of cool. The other part too is like, and I'll tell you this, like as far as money, and spending money, so on Amazon, you can run ads on Amazon like really cheap, like $5 a day or something like that, right? And if you can get some momentum there, you could just increase it over time. I don't think you're going to be able to get to like massive numbers on Amazon. Like I don't think you can spend $10,000 a day like advertising on Amazon for your book, but you might be able to get to like 1,000 a day where you see like a nice ROI. And the other thing, man, and here's again is the harsh reality of this stuff is that all of you have your stories that I heard some of. I don't know all of them, but I know Mike's a little bit more because Mike and I were kind of like texting and stuff. And so the money really is not in the book itself. The money is in the stuff that comes after or as a result of your story. And so that is really in speeches. It's in, working with people like others that have maybe gone through what you've gone through. And that's really kind of where the money is. I think the biggest part is in speaking gigs. And so you use your book as a platform again to do that. So, all right, Mike, well, where am I supposed to speak? Okay. I don't actually speak a lot, and especially even during COVID, I'm just busy with other stuff. I'd love to speak more, but Here's what you do. You go to like your literally you go to like your local Rotary, you go to your local like Toastmasters or some of these other like networking like communities, and you say, hey, look, I have this book. I'd love to give a speech about resilience, whatever it is. And you speak for free, right? And when you do that, the one thing I'll say is make sure you film it, right? So that way there you have the content. So you are actually getting some value out of that. And again, when you go to like a Rotary club and you speak, you never know who's in that Rotary club. There might be some baller who's like, you know what, I love this guy's story and I want to help him. So that's what I would do if I were you, and try and get as many of those free ones under your belt. Do you know who Ryan Blair is?
No.
He's actually from LA. He wrote the book Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain. He also wrote the book Rock Bottom to Rock Star. Former gangbanger, turned his life around, was the CEO of a company called Visalis out there, multi-billion-dollar company. He tells stories about when he was speaking, he was literally just speaking for food. They're like, hey, buy me lunch or whatever. But he knew that he was building like kind of like a database of speeches, that he could then use to then ultimately get like a paid gig. I think all of your stories, I think my story too is super inspiring as well. But I think that's where the money is. It's not necessarily it's not in the book. And that's a harsh reality of it. Like my first book, I'm staring at it. Ask more. Look at it. So you see this right here is, remember what these are? This is a CD series, right? That goes along with my book. And I had all this other stuff and courses. Like I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to sell some $9.97 course that everyone else is selling. It just wasn't it's not who I am, but, and so I didn't make any money with my books at all. I got an advance and stuff, but I didn't make any money with my books. But I'll tell you this, all of us wouldn't be talking today if I hadn't have done what I've done with my books, right? Because that's really kind of put me on, on the map, so to speak. So Pablo, again, if I'm you, I'm getting out and about in the community, and I'm like, look, I want to talk about this. I want to tell my story, and you just do it for free. Eventually, you'll get paid. And by the way, that advice that I'm giving you, I got from Kevin Harrington. You guys know Kevin Harrington. He's the guy from Shark Tank. Not Kevin O'Leary, Kevin Harrington. He's the original shark on Shark Tank. He's also the creator of the infomercial. He's a mentor of mine and a friend of mine, and we've done a lot of business together. And I noticed he was speaking a lot. I'm like, hey, man, how do I do that? The advice I just gave you, he gave me.
Mike, I thank you for taking the time to answer. I think that was very well said. I just want to do a quick follow-up then. So you think that putting any effort and energy into trying to increase sales of the book is probably not going to end up in the results that I'm looking for, and so maybe trying to get speaking engagements is probably 100%. A better way. Is that what you're saying then? Is that
100%?
But
Got you.
But I mean, I don't know if y'all heard me say this before, but I knew when I came out of prison I wanted to self-publish my book. Right? I knew that. There was nothing. I had a book deal while I was in prison. They would have had to come at me with over a lot of money. Right. Because I was in prison making a lot of money. So they would have had to come at me with a lot of money. So I studied it. I can go get my books. I brought them home from prison with me. Right. So everything he's saying is right. Right. It's a blueprint to it. Everything he's saying is right. Now, we could be, like he say, those rooms, the more rooms you're in, the more you speak, people hear you speak, the more, you tell your story, there's somebody's going to say, you know what, here go a hook, I'm coming with you.
That's it.
What you need.
Right.
That's it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game, period. If you want to win the game, you got to be in the game.
Yep.
And it takes money.
And it takes money.
It does. And that's the part that sucks, man. I mean, You know, like I help authors all the time, and then they come, they want to like. I mean, so I charge 60,000 to do what I do. Plus, I have bonuses at the end. It gets almost to like 100. It sounds like a big number, to make these lists. And then you have people that will charge up to $15,000 just to get you to number one on Amazon, which I think I think that's pretty expensive. I think a lot of people can just do that on their own if they really spend the time and to understand it. The self-publishing stuff, like self-publishing now versus what it was in the past, is like leaps and bounds way better than what it used to be. And the kind of the negative stigma that it might have had back then is, you still have the snooty, like, people literary world. They're like, you got to be with Simon and Schuster if you're to be relevant. That's not accurate, but the only thing that I think with publishers that really help people with is in fact putting you in rooms potentially and maybe making some connections. But the publishers themselves, that's why they hire me. Publishers don't sell books. You have to sell the book, right?
Right.
But again, the money, guys, unless you become the next J.K. Rowling's or your book becomes a movie, and the fallacy of your book becoming a movie, I think is a bit of a dream. Can it become a movie? Sure. Could somebody license it? Sure. But it's a very long shot. So I'm saying, get out there and speak, man. Tell your story. Make sure you record it too, and then use it. So all right. So then, like, a la Gary Vaynerchuk, you guys probably know him. So if you're out there speaking and you're recording it, and then you take that, and Gary Vee talks about, I love how people also like don't give people credit. Like I try to give people credit for stuff that I learned. So people anyway. So you take that content, it becomes micro content, and then you just continue to push it out there. Especially if you do, like, guys, I'm recording myself right now. I know that I think this is recorded too. So there might be some more moments where that I might like, and I'll isolate it and I'll put it out there. So when you're out there doing that, you can so now you have more stuff to put out there, Pablo, each and every day. And
Right.
like, so StreamYard, right? So I don't know which platforms you guys are on, but this streams across all platforms. Here's another thing I'll tell you that's free that anybody can do. And you guys are doing it now, which is this, right? I mean, the barrier of entry of a podcast is zero. Like, you could do a podcast from your phone with the microphone on your phone.
Right.
So LC, you're on. I can tell you're on your phone, right? I don't know if Mike is what is right. So like that's awesome. I mean, I think that is unbelievable. So now, so you guys keep doing what you're doing, and you keep pushing it out there and getting content out there. I think that's awesome. And then the other thing too, I mean, we're kind of still talking about the same stuff, Pablo, too. But like, okay, so now you have an established podcast. Then you're like, well, how do I make money there? Because I'm just like you. I'm the same way. On my podcast, I don't really make money. Now you have services like Patreon, where it's a subscription-based service. So you launch your podcast, and if people want more content or if they want more access or what have you, they have to pay for that. And you can start at $5 a month all the way up to $200 a month. And before you know it, so my brother, I'd mentioned earlier that I got, he builds grow rooms. That's his space. It's, it's a kind of a natural transition for him, right? And and so he has a
That's
podcast.
money.
Yeah, he makes money. And he has a podcast called Cultivation Conversation, right? And they live stream it on Twitch. And I was just with him today. And he says to me, Mike, I think we have, he said they have 40 subscribers, paying subscribers on Patreon. And I'm like jealous. I'm like, you kidding me? By the way, he gives me credit. I told him to start a podcast, and he's like, Mike, I think this is my future. I think this could be it. And so Pablo, man, like if you have something to say, you want to tell your stories, or the other part is doing what you're doing with me. Just bring people on, interview other people. That for me, that's all I do is I interview other people. And guys, when so I was talking, so I would say again, again, we're kind of going in a bunch of different directions, but so when I was with my brother today, I was in 3 storage lockers that we're building out because my life has been retracted significantly over the past couple of years, and we don't have enough time to talk about really what happened to me financially, but it was bad. It was $20 million bad, right? And so, and I've been trying to figure that out and fix that problem, but it's really, really difficult to do. So I'm at a point where I needed to make a decision on some of the offices that I have and some of the things that I have. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to get some storage lockers. We're just going to put them in there. And guys, as I'm going through this, you know, you don't feel good, right? You feel like you've lost, you feel defeated. And I was like, you know what? What if I start filming this? Right. So I started filming what I'm doing, you know, and then I'm sitting there and I'm in one of the storage lockers. I'm talking to this woman, she's worth $100 million. Right. And she's like, Mike, how's it going? And I was like, you really want to know? I'm like, I'm sitting in a storage locker, fucking sweating my nuts off. And I'm like loathing about where everything went wrong, you know? And it just came to me as I was talking to her. And I'm like, you know what? I want to interview other people about this very moment. You know, you had said to me earlier, LC, like you wanted to hear the details, right? So I'm
Right.
launching a whole new podcast called, and I think all of you would love to have on, called From the Storage Locker, where I'm literally doing my podcast. This, I'm in a full-on TV studio that I'm in right here, by the way. There's a television set out there that we've, I've been on television for 15 years straight, 24 hours a day, 7 days. If you've ever watched TV, I guarantee you've seen me. So this is where I'm at right now. I'm debating whether or not I'm going to stay here anymore. And so I'm starting a podcast from a storage locker where I'm going to interview people about their rock bottom moments and what they did to overcome them, or if they're still kind of working through it, because that part of the story is interesting too. That whole process of the storage locker is costing me a little bit of money to build it out, because we're actually building out like kind of a cool studio. But the point I'm getting to, Pablo, is like, man, you guys have amazing stories, and that I think a lot of people would want to hear about, and other people and some of your other contacts. And if you're doing what you're doing now, eventually it will take hold. And you can make money doing this stuff again, especially with like Patreon. Like if you take a look at Patreon, kind of how it works, it's amazing. It's like pretty cool. You know, like my brother's like, again, it's like, he told me it's like $400 a month, but it's better than zero. And he just started.
Right.
You know, so.
Well, thanks a lot, man. I think you've really answered my question and some, and I hope not. I learned a lot, and I think that Mike and Latif also learned. So, listen,
absolutely.
I'm going to turn it over to Latif because we're kind of like out of time now. I don't know what direction he's going to take it in, but Mike, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate the insight, and stay in touch, brother.
Absolutely, appreciate you guys.
Okay, so let me in closing, Mike. Let me say, man, you gave us a lot of information, man, and what we expected. I have wrote down some questions that we never even got to because of what you talked about, the direction that it went in. Man, I mean, this was something that we all needed, you know. And I look forward to being in contact with you again. You have some great ideas. You have some great pointers. I'm sure that we all was taking notes on some of the things that you said. So again, we thank you. We appreciate you, brother. We look forward to having you back again if your schedule permits.
Same goes for all you guys, by the way.
Yes, and maybe, we can continue to network and take this to another whole level. And with that, we're going to conclude our meeting today, our segment today. And for those who, if you are in, you can still send us some